Welcome to another episode of Crimson Sin with Tamsin Leigh. I am your host, Tamsin Leigh. In 1971, Washington, D.C. experienced its first known serial killer. Over the next 17 months, the Freeway Phantom abducted and murdered 6 young black girls, ages 10 to 18. It wasn't until the 4th murder that police recognized the pattern. With each subsequent killing, the Phantom's actions became more brazen and cruel. He forced his 4th victim to call her family before killing her and left a taunting note in the pocket of his 5th victim that read, "Catch me if you can." Decades later, the identity of the Freeway Phantom remains a chilling mystery. While serial killers had already gained notoriety in cities like New York and Los Angeles, by 1971, Washington, D.C. was about to experience its first series of such crimes. That April, 13-year-old Carol Spinks left her home with $5 to buy TV dinners at a local 7-Eleven. The 4-block walk should have been routine, but Carol never returned. 6 days later, her body was discovered. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled, and though clothed, her shoes were missing. Investigators believe she was held captive for several days before being killed. Carol's identical twin sister, Carolyn, described the aftermath of the murder as terrible, saying, "I couldn't get it together. I thought I was losing my mind." Tragically, Carol's death was just the beginning. 2 months later, another body was discovered in the same area, an embankment near the I-295 freeway. On July 8, 1971, 16-year-old Darlenia Johnson from Congress Heights was abducted while on her way to her summer job at the Oxon Hill Recreation Center. A witness reported seeing her shortly after her abduction, getting into an older black car driven by a black man. 11 days later, her body was found just 15 feet from where Carol Spinks's body had been discovered. Disturbingly, police had received an anonymous call nearly a week prior, providing details about the body's location that only the killer would have known. By the time Johnson's body was found, again clothed, but missing shoes, it was too decomposed to determine the cause of death or whether she had been sexually assaulted, though evidence of strangulation was found. Just 9 days later, the body of a 3rd victim was found. The killer, who would become known as the Freeway Phantom, was growing bolder. This time, he forced his victim to make a phone call home before her death. 10-year-old Brenda Faye Crockett disappeared in July 1971. Her mother had sent her to the local grocery store for bread and dog food, but Brenda never returned. About 2 hours later, the phone rang at the Crockett residence. Brenda's mother was out searching for her, so Brenda's 7-year-old sister, Bertha, answered. Brenda, crying, told her younger sister over the phone that she thought she was in Virginia and had been snatched up by a white man. She also said her kidnapper had called a taxi to take her home. A short time later, Brenda called again. This time, her stepfather answered. She repeated her previous statements, then asked, "Did my mother see me?" After a pause, heavy footsteps could be heard, followed by Brenda whispering, "Well, I'll see you." The call then ended abruptly. Authorities quickly determined that Brenda had likely been forced to make the calls by her killer, who provided her with false information to gain time and mislead investigators. The following morning, at 5:50 a.m., a hitchhiker discovered Brenda's body, shoeless, in a highly visible location on U.S. Route 50 near the Baltimore-Washington Parkway in Prince George's County, Maryland. She had been raped and strangled, with a scarf tied around her neck. The murders continued. In October 1971, 12-year-old Nenomoshia Yates vanished on her way home from the grocery store. Her body, still warm, was found just 2 hours later by a teenager. Like the other victims, she was missing her shoes, and unidentified green fibers were discovered on her clothing. A witness reported seeing her get into a blue Volkswagen, but this lead proved fruitless. With 4 young girls dead, DC police finally acknowledged that a serial killer was responsible. And the name, the Freeway Phantom, emerged. On November 15th, 1971, 18-year-old Woodard of Baltimore had dinner with a high school classmate and then boarded a city bus around 11:30 p.m. to return to her Maryland Avenue home. 6 hours later, a police officer found her body in a grassy area near Prince George's County Hospital by an access ramp to Route 202 from the Baltimore-Washington Parkway. She had been stabbed and strangled. Unlike the other victims, she was still wearing her shoes, and a coat had been placed over her chest. In one of the coat's pockets, police found a note from the killer, a clue that would baffle investigators. This is tantamount to my insensitivity to people, especially women. I will admit the others when you catch me if you can. The note was signed Freeway Phantom. Investigators, after analyzing handwriting samples, concluded that the note, written on paper torn from the victim's school notebook, had been dictated to and then written by Woodard herself. They also suspected she may have known her killer. Following Woodard's murder, the Freeway Phantom seemed to disappear. Months passed without another killing, until 10 months later, when the body of 17-year-old Diane Williams was discovered alongside the freeway. In a brazen move, the Freeway Phantom then called Williams's parents, confessing, "I killed your daughter." With local police at an impasse, the FBI took over the investigation in 1974 and identified a suspect, Robert Askins, who had previously served time for killing a sex worker. A search warrant of Askins' residence uncovered suspicious items, including photographs of young girls and a knife linked to a separate crime. Despite the suspicious items, none of the evidence connected Askins to the 6 Freeway Phantom victims. He was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life in prison for kidnapping and raping 2 other women. Another theory focused on the Green Vega Gang, a group of 5 men who kidnapped and raped women during the same period as the Freeway Phantom's crimes. However, no evidence linked them to the Freeway Phantom murders. As time passed, the Freeway Phantom case remained open. But in 2009, DC police admitted to losing the case file, including crucial evidence like potential DNA. Maybe it's over there in some box and we haven't stumbled across it, Detective Jim Trainum commented. Who knows? Detectives continued their efforts to reconstruct the lost files. The $150,000 reward for information about the Freeway Phantom remains unclaimed. The tragic deaths left families devastated. "We were devastated," said Wilma Harper, Diane Williams' aunt. At first, it didn't register that she was really dead, but the reality soon hit home. Harper founded the Freeway Phantom organization to support those who had lost loved ones to violence. The families of the 6 girls also found solace in supporting one another. "At first, I couldn't talk to anyone or even look at pictures," said Mary Woodard, Brenda's mother. People say they know what you're going through, but unless you've actually experienced the tragedy, you really don't know. Sharing with someone who's gone through the same thing helped me to cope. Though the Freeway Phantom case remains unsolved, the Freeway Phantom organization continues to raise awareness about unsolved murders and provide support to victims' families. It's a two-way street, Harper explained in a 1987 interview. The police can't do it all by themselves. Community members have to consider it important enough to get involved and see that these murders are stopped. What are your thoughts on today's case? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for listening and your support. Stay safe, and I will see you for the next episode.